Hello, everybody, and welcome to Revolution. Today we will not be doing Galatians. With the recent bombing in Iran, I just felt like it was important to kind of have a heart to heart talk. Maybe I've been spending too much time in Galatians and listening to Paul's rebukes. Maybe I spend too much time watching the news or watching social media. But it just seems like we're in really, really, well, I mean, we continue to be in a dark place. And I think it's vital that we talk about this. And I think it's vital that we, you know, talk to Christians about this. Revolution is always an inclusive place. It's always, everybody's welcomed here. Um, I never want to just keep non believers or people who don't buy into Christianity or things like that, because I know a lot of you who listen who are just like, it's not my thing, but I still get something out of it, and I'm grateful for you here. Um, and I think you probably get something out of this as well. But today is really, to a lot of Christians, you might hear this. Well, I don't know if this is necessarily to me, but maybe it's for somebody else, or maybe it's something you need to hear in order for us to speak with other folks. And that's the time now. Some of you are probably thinking the title is a bit much, Born to Kill. I will give you a little bit of a clue to that. I mean, yes, the new Social Distortion album is called that, and it's one of my favorite albums, and I was listening to that song, but I was thinking about how it often feels though that's what humanity has come down to, and especially the, you know, past few years of living in this country. And I think we got to talk about it. So we're going to get right into this. War and death and destruction and racism and sexism and, all the isms are nothing new. Um, but I think we're being reminded every day that the volume's been turned to 11. And, you know, I think of the horrors that happened on October 7th, and then the horrors that happened to the reaction of that by uh, the state of Israel to Palestinians and all the Palestinians that have suffered and been killed. I think about this year, in the past year, not this year itself, but within the past 12 months, the end of U.S. aid and all the people who have suffered and gone hungry and died of diseases because of that. I've thought about ICE and the continued cruelty and use of ICE to act as almost a group of to go into a community and say, oh, we're just trying to help, but really cause chaos and horror, and doing it in a way that's so political that causes, oh no, it's, this is the right thing to do. They broke the law, and but using these horrific tactics and cruel ways of dealing with this. We didn't have ICE until 2003, folks. And then today, the attack on Iran that killed over 100, at this point, that's the number, elementary school girls, children, um, and just not to mention this whole thing with the Epstein files that just continues to go on and seems to be no accountability in this country. Um, but the loss of these children today, the bombs that dropped, these American bombs, and it's so strange to me because I talked about it earlier, and people were like, "Oh no, it was Israel." I'm like, "Well, we've given, Democrats and Republicans have given billions of dollars to the state of Israel, to the government of Israel to have those bombs as well. I mean, it's whose bombs is it? It might as well be our bombs. They're our allies. This is an attack that we're a part of. It's strange to watch people try to justify their belief system, or something that maybe they stood behind, or a group that they stood behind, or a party they've accepted or continue to defend, and continue to see cruelty and murder and hate out of that, yet continue to try to justify it. It's a horrible state of things. Um, so I hope that those who claim to follow Jesus, and some of you who still have the nerve to support this type of thing, yet call yourself pro-life, please wake up to the realities of the horrors that are going on, and the destruction that we're causing, and the innocent lives that we're taking, and that even justifiable war is not a Christian principle. It wasn't even a principle that Christians thought about until about 300 years in, when Constantine started to accept the Christian religion into Rome. Before that, we were a complete, based on the words of Jesus, the teachings of Paul, and all those teachers within that 300 years, we remained a completely non-violent religion. So when you support these things, and when you justify war, when you justify the death, that's an evil regime, so you're gonna, you make an omelet, you break a few eggs. When you have that type of attitude, you're justifying something that was not even close to our faith until 300 years, until governments got involved and needed justice, and to justify their militaries and their armies. The act and works of faith and Christianity and Jesus in politics and in these things has been shown to us within the past 100 years by people like Martin Luther King Jr., people like Gandhi, people like that, who come in are people of peace, calling for tough conversations and working things out and changing laws that bring justice to all people. Killing people, causing people to suffer, putting people in jails, tearing families apart. This is not Christianity. And I'm to the point where it's sickening to see it justified so continuously. I saw a Christian lawyer today talk about, post something saying like, we've got to get the courts out of the way of the president so he can do things more freely. I mean, the last thing as Christian folks, the last thing we need is to take away the accountability of our leaders, who seem so hungry for power and intimidation, and for killing people without cause, without the rule of law, without going through the proper channels. And for us to justify that and continue to push something towards that is, to me, a failure of the faith and a failure of Christianity as a whole. And the fact that so many of us not only remain silent but continue to defend such horrific things makes me feel like it's, I don't think most humans have to try so hard to justify human cruelty like Christians. To justify the loss of humanity, and these things, and somehow say, well, it's because we're Christians and we're not of this world. I don't know. It's like the justifications. I always heard about justifying sin and things like that when I was a kid, and the funny things they make you think about when you grow up in the evangelical church and the fundamentalist church, they make you think that stuff, like such ridiculous little things, like, oh, smoking cigarettes, watching dirty movies, all this stuff. Yet when it comes to killing and people being starved and people not getting medication and war, we find a way to justify it. The true horrors of humanity are somehow justified, and we fight these small things, or we fight these things with identity, and we go, oh, look at these people in drag reading books to kids, But when someone comes in with guns, we don't talk about getting rid of guns. You don't see Christians, you don't see pro-life Christians talking about getting rid of guns. I mean, guns serve a purpose. So there's no consistency to this faith. And there's a reason so many people are doing what they call deconstructing or rethinking their faith, or taking other second and third looks at their faith, or leaving the faith, is because there's just no logical conclusion to this way of living, to these ways of teaching, and to these ways of thinking, except to leave or to disappear. We're not doing Galatians, but in Galatians, Paul says, if you continue to bite and devour one another, you'll be consumed. You'll be gone. You'll be taken. And that's the only logical end to this type of thinking and this type of sin and this type of justification. And I do call it sin because I believe in the way Tillich talked about it, as sin is separation and grace is reunion. And we just continue to separate and divide each other over things that I don't think any biblical teacher at the time even thought about. I mean, that's why we go through Galatians, because I think it's the closest to it, the closest to this division, this closest to this fighting and biting and killing and destroying. But I don't even think it gets close to it, because we constantly look for ways to downplay the message of Christ. And some folks, oh, he's just angry. I've got one person who's like, oh, Jay, just let it go. You got to heal. I've healed. I've let it, most of it go. But what I'm critiquing is what I'm seeing every day, how I'm seeing people of my own faith act and react and justify things. I critique this faith because this faith is important to me, and because I think there are things that are still very valuable to this faith. Even if I was to wake up tomorrow and they said, well, guess what? It's been proven Jesus didn't exist. They made a time machine and all this. I would still say, well, there are valuable things to this faith, and a message of this faith of loving others, being kind to others, and doing there is still a roadmap here to truth. Dr. King once said there can be no great disappointment where there is not great love, and I would say that's where I'm at. I get very tired of some of my disagreements and arguments of people trying to, I can't even share philosophy without people like, look at the Bible, and you have to explain it. Well, the Bible says this and this, that's not where you really want to get these ideas from. You're also got Old Covenant, New Covenant, you've got a lot of things going on, and people seem to put it on such a pedestal that they create a very idol out of the Bible and the Word itself. Trying to ignore the contradictions, even from Old Covenant to New Covenant, and we're made clear that those things have changed, yet we try to make those things work and recreate a different type of law that just works to justify cruelty. So I want to make it clear, the Old Covenant gives you no excuses to support the things that I have spoken of earlier. It gives us no excuses to accept war. Oh, David went to war. Oh, these people went to war, and then they, and they only went to war with, when they were the smaller army. But that's over. New Covenant came. Jesus upped the ante. Read Matthew. That things got turned up. Things changed. He changed things. Reminds me of when in The Dark Knight, when the Joker is speaking to Batman, and he looks at him and goes, "You've changed things." And that's like what Jesus, he changed things. Things are different now. And yet we still seem unable to grasp that message of Christ, or that message of Christianity. Constantine, who came 300 years later and decided that, oh, God gave me a vision and we're going to have, we can have wars and, and we can have shields with crosses on them, and that's no justification. That's someone manipulating and bringing in and converting that faith into something else that's no longer the faith, that is no longer the message of Christ, but otherwise it wouldn't fit. I mean, you can't just be like, well, I'm going to be a government, we're going to be a Christian, and we're going to be completely passive, and we're going to love our enemies, and when they throw bombs at us, we're going to send them edible bouquets. You know, you just couldn't run a country that way, right? But that's why this to follow Christ is a different call. Now, I will let you know I am recording this at about, well, let's see, it's 11:30 on a Saturday night. I'm going out of town, but I was going to record the Galatians in the morning. But with everything that's happening today, I didn't feel like I could sleep, and I felt like we had to talk about this. And politicians and country and patriotism is not an excuse. I mean, unless those things are your idols, unless those things are your ultimate concern, those are not the excuses to justify the murder of children. One of the reasons it really hit me today, and children really hit me today, is because I'm a father of young children. I work at a school, and I work in the after-school program with elementary children. And I think about all those kids I see, and I think about all those kids being under rubble. And I saw all the bloody school supplies and all the bloody backpacks and all the things that we rush to get and put to and have on our kids and we take for granted, covered in blood, just wishing that those kids were still attached to those things. And yet, I see people of faith either in complete denial of what's happening, which is wild, or find ways to justify what's happening. If this is not your faith and you want to justify those things, go ahead. But if you want to come to me about these things and trying to use your faith to justify murder and killing and bombs and death, and some say God put your politician in power, no. There was a reason I was upset with Biden and his support for Israel, and Harris, and why a lot of you left me, because you left the revolution because you thought, oh, he's lost his mind. He's not supporting our team. I can't support a team that does that. I have to always speak truth to power. That is part of my work. That is part of my call. You know, I try to follow into the footsteps of people like King and Hume and folks like that who went before me. I'm not saying you have to be like me, but I am saying I'm going to try my best to hold you accountable and to remind you what we are called to do if this is a faith that you have decided to subscribe to. Since we've started our clips and things on on YouTube, I get a lot of very interesting comments. A lot of people telling me that I'm wasted years of my life doing this, and that I'm a lost soul, and that I'm a hypocrite, or because I have this symbol on my hat, they don't take into the idea that it says grace, or things that I'm, silly things, from silly things to serious things, and it's often because I just don't agree with, whatever their idea of how things should work, or how this faith should work, or we don't have the similar theology or same political or same convictions. And honestly, quite often it's just because you're trying to call people out to love more radically, and they don't want to do it. They think that the faith doesn't allow them to do it, and that somehow it's some sort of really strange, impotent type of love that is only effective within some sort of self-righteousness, or some sort of righteous goal of something that's separating people constantly. But again, I will tell you that separation is really sin, and we've lost it. This faith has been slowly hijacked, and I'm not saying that everybody who does it is bad or evil, but I do believe a lot of those people are very misinformed and caught up in tradition and caught up in communities where they have not been told the truth. I don't know how many folks I've seen go off to seminary and come back and just take time off because they were so freaked out by what they learned in biblical scholarship and biblical history and things like this. I don't know if I can have anything to do with it. But over time, they're like, okay, maybe I can compromise. I just won't ever talk about this stuff. And they leave it out. And they go knowingly telling these people things to be true, or to be, or to make excuses, or to use apologetics to try to bend and twist and shape things so they fit together, just because they're afraid of the truth, and because they're afraid that the truth is not strong enough to hold up the faith. That's why I believe we have apologetics, is you have a lot of people who write books on apologetics who have so much doubt and so much fear that if you take something out or something's wrong, the whole faith is going to fall apart. And to me, it's faith, but it's not much of a faith. I believe there's doubt is allowed to be in faith. I believe reality is allowed to be. Education is allowed to be. The questions, and I believe doubt is an element of faith. But these folks fear doubt so much that they end up justifying lies and cruelty and these type of things in order to toe the line. And some might say, "Oh, you're being a bit harsh," but I would say, ICE, what we've done to the in Iran, dropping bombs on elementary schools. Even Obama dropped bombs on a school bus. I mean, what the support we could put behind Israel and what they did to the Palestinians and what continues to happen to the Palestinians, I would say is much worse than me being what I'm saying to you right now. You might be, some of you might be angry, you might be hurt, you might only be seeing a clip and you're just so mad, you're going to tell me all about it. That's fine. It's great because I'm starting to run out of time to talk to all my critics because I've gotten so many, so maybe that's a good thing. Some of you say, well, Jay, and I've heard this for years and years and years, probably since the moment I discovered grace. You say that, oh, he's a people pleaser. Oh, he's one of those lukewarm liberals. I mean, as soon as I became gay affirming, and that was enough for people to write me completely off. It was like I became an enemy. I remember that, my mother died and my marriage fell apart, and someone was like, God took his hands off of you. And I mean, this was people that you would know, and you would be like, really? Like that? They said that? Like, yeah, like God's hand was removed from me because my theology got wanky in their opinion, and God allowed my mother to die of cancer and for my first marriage to fall apart. So that's the type of the love of Christ we're talking about here. It reminds me of Paul saying, have I become your enemy? He's just one of those lukewarm liberal Christians. It's so crazy. I've had conversations. Often when I have conversations, like, oh, you're this political party. And I'm like going, first of all, I'm not often what they're guessing. And then two, it's like, what? The fact that you think that I'm a particular group of a political party and that's how I see my faith says a lot to me. It says a lot to me that people are seeing their faith through their politics rather than their politics through their faith. And it's become very clear that a lot of people think that way. Oh, you're just one of those liberals and you can't teach it. You're going, really? Like this is the divider now is what party you belong to, is what kind of Christian you are. I've got a few verses I'm going to share with you all here in a minute. But even when I call people out, when I'm calling you out and saying, get back to the principles of the faith, literally get back to the very fundamentals. It seems like the fundamentalists don't even know the fundamentals anymore. The commandments that we're told to be our top priority, somehow that still seems to be lukewarm. Folks are more worried about the small things that we've created in identity politics and, whatever the latest craze is to, put here and there, rather than what Christ called us to. And they find a way to you're just too much, it's wild, and I will say, I do believe we negotiate with the Bible and things that we see. I think it's hard to do, I just take it all in at once. You can't, because there's so many contradictions. You don't want to be a hypocrite. But I do believe there's some very clear messages into what we're called to do. And it feels like people are constantly looking to put asterisks next to those things. So my question is to a lot of you, is it that you have, and I know I've preached to the choir a lot here, but I hope folks from different backgrounds are listening. Maybe you'll see a clip and give us a listen. Is it You who have compromised have you compromised for country or to be a part of a tribe? Has it been for your party? Because so many people ask me about my party politics when I'm explaining my convictions. Uh, because I don't understand, because you often will talk about loving you. Oh, well, that's complicated. It's complicated to love. And I go, well, I've spent most of my life in the Word, and the one thing I've realized is that love in the Bible, except for there being different meanings for like different types of love, romantic love and friendship love and agape love, and those things, it doesn't seem very complicated. I mean, Paul, we hear it mostly at weddings, and I think it's almost an impossible standard for married people, but we hear it a lot of times. We hear Corinthians 13 a lot of times at weddings, and yet we think, oh, it's just, oh, that's complicated. Whew, whoa, what is he saying? You know? So many excuses for the horrors of war and the murder and mistreatment of our neighbors in the name of theology and Christianity and faith. I see some of these folks, these talking heads, and these like influencers and things like that, and I'm shocked. I'm shocked on both sides, to be honest with you, of just the cruelty towards one another, and and even how often some of my progressive friends and different types of even liberation things like, oh, he's not. You're so naive. You're so naive. You know, that's like, you're preaching like this forgiveness without justice, and I don't believe in lack of justice. I do believe we need to have justice, you know, and I do believe I'm teaching very similar principles that I've learned from Dr. King, and he was, I'm sure it was pretty difficult for him. Now I understand why Dr. King was so unpopular during the civil rights movements and things like this, because the idea of loving your enemy and seeing your enemy as a victim of misinformation and trying to work towards reunion and things like that is a very scary thing and a very big ask. I get it. That's why I always talk about what I learned in 12-step program, progress, not perfection. I get it. It takes time. There's a lot of work to be done. But it's like before you can even get that out, people are like, oh, no, 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 no. And I'm going, no, it's going to take a lot of work. And sometimes I wonder, if it's like the moderates who say, wait, if these folks are like, no, 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 that's just, there's no justice, I'm going like, well, then we've got to create the justice. We've got to do these things. We've got to take these opportunities to rebuild this type of trust. And maybe we don't do it in our lifetime, but we've got to work towards that, and to say, well, these people aren't deserving of repentance or forgiveness or change. I'm going like, well, that's still saying wait. At what point do we restore one another? What point do we start working towards the beloved community? At what point does that happen? At what point do we work on not scapegoating each other, but still speaking the truth to one another? Within love, because we're trying to spread love, we're trying to help love be infinite, we're trying to help people change, we're trying to help people grow, we're trying to help people love themselves and others. That's, I don't know. It's tough. And I'm grateful that we have different people talking about different things, because you can weigh it and hold it and look at it. And I think we often need each other. We can work off each other, relate to each other, hear each other, learn from each other, and grow from each other. I think that's a great place to be. And I don't think disagreeing is a bad place to be. But when we start justifying war, murder, the mistreatment of our immigrant brothers and sisters in Christ, the the death of children, with Christianity, we've lost it completely. I look for the day when we're kind of arguing on how to do more restoring, because it seems to be a thing where people are changing their minds. Maybe that would even be a better argument, rather than this idea of just saying like, please stop. re-examine, like, I'm sitting with listening to people, and they've already told me that my life's been a waste, and I'm listening to them, and I don't want to say the same thing to them, like, well, your life's been a waste, but no, somewhere you're like, man, you got to re-examine what you've been taught. You've got to look deeper. There's a reason why studying and context and these things are valuable. And for me, what's valuable about them, for me, is it took me back to the very place that, like, my mother was at. It's strange, but for me, I heard so much, so I had to see, is the legalism here, is this hatred, is the justification for cruelty here? And I had to look and look and look and go, no, it's not here. So I had to look for it. Somehow my mother just got it. She just trusted the words of Jesus, and all right, that figures it out, and I'm going to stick with those. And for me, I had to study over and over again for 30 years to go, oh, okay, that was right. So let's look at because we have to remember, Jesus made it very clear that our neighbor is everyone. That was the whole point behind the story of the Samaritan. And, feels like that, who is my neighbor, who is my neighbor is the question that people ask, and don't want to hear. They don't want to hear the answer to it. So I'm going to look at a few verses that just really came to me this evening to share with you as I was preparing this talk. This is one of those rare talks where I got the thought of the title actually before I even started writing the talk, and this idea of born to kill, because so many act as though that's just who we are. And I see so many people losing faith in humanity. And my usual things are, I'm like, well, I've just read too much King, and I love my mom, and she got into me, and then people use like, oh yeah, you're right, but people are like, I don't know, man, I'm really just losing it. I just like, screw Jesus. I don't even think humans are worth a shit. It's all gone. So that's what people are feeling and seeing, and to just say, well, let me just write that off as that, their politics are wrong. People are hopeless, and they hate each other. I mean, there's a big problem here. In Matthew 18:6, and the reason I wanted to read this one is because of the kids, because of all the amputees that we saw. I mean, the just amazing and horrific number of amputees of all these children in Gaza, Palestinian children that we have seen, that people continue to justify. I mean, I have people reach out to me every time I mention Palestine or Gaza to try to justify what's happening there, and I don't know how they continue to do it. And I always go to those conversations with the utmost respect, and at times I've pulled back a lot because I was having conversations with people, but it's just to the point where these horrors never stop, and then these horrific things are getting worse. These horrors of our life are getting worse and worse and worse, and so you see these children suffering. You see the children. I saw this thing of a lady who went into one of the ICE detention centers of children, and you see the letters they're writing, and you see these kids, and it breaks your heart. But the problem is there's a lot of people whose heart, it just doesn't break at all. And, well, their parents shouldn't have done it. Well, they shouldn't have done it. Like when I'm talking about children having free meals at school, being able to eat, and people go, well, that's not my problem. I'm like, listen, if you follow Jesus, it is your problem. Well, it's Christians should take care of it, not the government. It's like going like, okay, well, do you know any Christians who have that much money who are going to feed these kids? Like, our thing is we need to work to solve this problem. So sometimes we're going to go into politics and talk to the politicians and remind them of the needs of humanity. And the needs of humanity aren't, oh, we got to have separate bathrooms. We've got all these things. You know what I mean? It's like, no, people need to be able to buy groceries and pay rent and have jobs that are livable. And it seems as though those aren't the issues the politicians have us arguing about. It's really is a horrific time to be a human being, and look to how petty we can be about these things and the things that we will defend and stand for, and somehow think it's just because this is part of our team identity or our own identity, and that we've got our identity so wrapped up in it that for us to separate from it might hurt us, might cause us some sort of mental damage or some sort of isolation. You know, that's just being human. And I guess that's what happens when this faith comes in and really gets corrupted within us, and that we can't see the love. We can't see the Christ, or we can't see grace or the ground of being as the trump card. Instead, those are just cultural concepts and ideas that are a part of our world, but not genuinely our ground of being, or not our purpose of being. I once had a pastor ask me, like, do you love your kids more than you love God? And I said, yes. And I'll tell you why, because I would not be able to love God otherwise if I don't love my kids first, because I've seen what happens when you put your God above children, and your children get ignored and what happens to them and how they grow up. And I know that for God, that's the number one thing I'm called to do. Sometimes you have to remind people, and we're going to, let me cover it. Let's just get into these let's just get into some scriptures. We'll look at these scriptures and then we'll be done. But this one is very important to me, and I felt like we needed to read it, especially with the horrific bomb that dropped on this middle school today. If any of you put a stumbling block before one of these little ones who believe in me, it would be better for you if a great millstone were fastened around your neck and you were drowned in the depth of the sea. Woe to the world because its stumbling blocks, occasion for stumbling, are bound to come, bound to happen, bound to have stumbling blocks. That's going to happen, folks. But woe to the ones whom the stumbling block comes. And if you don't think missiles and blowing up countries, and countries saying we're a Christian country and we're blowing up Muslim countries, and we're a Christian country and we, Judaism, so we're going to stick with this. If you don't think these things are stumbling blocks at these children's feet, you're crazy. If you don't think masked men with machine guns running into some parents' house who've tried to create a better life for their children and throwing them in cages and then sometimes sending their family members off into third countries and things like that are not stumbling blocks, then I don't know what you're talking about. I mean, it is the fact that we've gotten so lost and so often we just, it's like we're playing church. Like, no, stumbling with cigarettes, keep the cigarettes from the kids, keep the, vaping, that's a stumbling block, don't let the kids hang out with the wrong crowd. That's a stumbling block. But we don't see the gigantic, huge boulders, the stumbling boulders of war and military and our police forces and how people are treating children. The fact that our children now, teachers are having to be taught how to deal with ICE if they come to the thing. They have to deal with the fact if a shooter comes into the school and things like that. Those are great stumbling blocks that we go, just depends on what party you're part of. Kid going hungry during school. Well, their parents should have done better. If you don't think those are stumbling blocks, you're blind. You're ignorant. You've lost the script. You've turned this into, you've turned the Bible into, the Lord of the Rings. You've turned it into a fantasy, and you're just going along with the motions. There are very mounts and mounts of religious people I talk to every day who have just completely, they can quote scripture to me. They can tell me everything about the Bible. They probably read it more than I do. Yet they have lost their humanity or their love or their care. We have pastors and leaders and teachers and theologians say, some people saying empathy is a sin. It's insane. It is like one of the most anti-Christian things I've ever heard. And yet here we go. Because if we remove those things, it gets a lot easier to not see those stumbling blocks, to not see those stumbling boulders in the way of to justify that, well, this is just part of what we were all born to kill. This is just living in a free country. This is just defending our own people. It's weird to watch how quickly people can become a nationalist and how quickly people can stop caring about the other when they're more worried about themselves. And I think that's why Christ does call us to love our neighbor as ourselves. So I ask you, do you think killing a mother of 3 who was trying to warn her neighbors? I mean, I've seen so much justification. Oh, she should have gone out. She should have done that. If you don't think that's a stumbling block. I mean, has religion turned you cruel? Has this Christianity turned you cruel? Has Christianity caused you to be indifferent? To hear things and see things differently, but in a way where you become indifferent to those who suffer because of those words. You somehow think it's justified. I often wonder if we would be better off in this world without this faith. That's why, imagine there's no God above us and, only sky above us, no God above, that type of thing. Because for some people, I just seem it's turned them into monsters. It's made them. This faith has turned people into like worse than people. Obvious, like people don't need a faith to know that they're called that they love other people and to see other people's humanity. The problem is then when people get a faith and they don't go, well, I'm going to try to love that person a little bit more. I'm never going to lose faith. I'm always going to be hopeful. I'm going to endure through every circumstance. That's Corinthians 13. No. Instead, they go, well, I have an excuse for being even more indifferent than you, my friend. And that's what they use the faith. I mean, watch people, like I watch some of, it's not even worth naming names. Turn over to me if you're following with me. We're going to stay in Matthew today. We're going to go back, though. We're going to go back to Matthew 5. And this is the thing, is like, do we really take the words, or the words that men wrote down as the words of Christ seriously? Or have we really just found a way to continue to put an asterisk by them and not see them as the literal fundamentals of the things you need to know? You have heard it was said to those in ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you, if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult your brother and sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to hell of fire. There you go. A lot of you really like hell fire ideas. I don't believe in a literal hell, but there you go. You can enjoy that. But that doesn't seem to keep those folks who really tell me I'm going to hell because I question hell from doing the things that were just said. So when you're offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go and be reconciled to your brother and sister, and then come offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court. I think another thing that people don't really understand is like the Beatitudes, where it says, blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they are filled. And it's changing as people don't think righteousness anymore of not supporting war and loving your neighbor as yourself. People don't think of like protecting your neighbor. Demanding human rights for some reason doesn't seem like righteousness to people anymore. It's almost become the opposite. Because that ends with, I guess close to the end. But 9 and 10, I think, make it pretty clear. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Yet right here on YouTube, I put a peace symbol and I was like, you're wearing a satanic symbol. Like we've done everything in our power to discount what we are called to truly love others. We have done everything we can to say that's not what we're supposed to do. To demonize peace. To see it as a bad idea. Oh, maybe everybody that's how the Antichrist is coming. I mean, gosh, all that bad freaking left and behind theology is crazy. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And if you think, see, I'm being persecuted right now because I support all this stuff and you're persecuting me. No, you're persecuted for righteousness because when you are a peacemaker, when you are hungering for righteous for other people, when you, it says, blessed are the merciful, for they receive mercy. And I don't know how we don't see these things. Jump over to Matthew 5:38. Yes, you have heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, then turn the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give them your cloak as well. I mean, these are just, whatever. Here's one, 5:43. You have heard that said, you shall love your neighbors and hate your enemies. And we're all really good at that. We even hate some of our neighbors as well, right? It seems like a lot of us, who's my neighbor? And those people, no, lawbreakers aren't my neighbors. Illegals aren't my neighbors. You hear shit like that. It's to justify it. Because they're saying, I want to be a law-abiding, and the Bible says to follow the law, because they take Romans 13 out of context, and that's why we did a whole talk on Romans 13 and went through it, and almost any theologian or even scholar worth their salt will tell you why those was written, and it wasn't written for all time. It was written for that moment in time for a particular reason, to keep that group of Christians safe from being killed and wiped out by Rome. And yet you think like, well, I mean, if I'm going to obey the law of the land, that one's going to just overdo the blessed or the peacemakers, or, not calling others fools, or turning the other cheek, And we'll keep the eye for an eye thing because, that Romans 13. I mean, it's just funny how all of a sudden Romans 13 becomes this big one. You don't really hear that a lot when when you have another party involved. It's always convenient when your party's in control to use Romans 13. Just search the history of what that verse has been used to justify. And you'll want to rip it out of the Bible. You have heard it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemy and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even tax collectors do the same? And the crazy thing is, if you jump down to where this ends, just a couple ones down, it goes, be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. And what this is saying is, if you want perfection, if you want godly perfection, you love your enemy as yourself. You do good to those who persecute you. You don't drop bombs on them. You don't call them and report them to ICE. You blow whistles because you want them to live. You find out how to make groceries for those people and protect them and keep them safe against unjust laws because you're loving your neighbor as yourself. Romans 13 or Old Covenant stuff like that, or your party doesn't come in and go, don't worry, we got an asterisk for you. You don't have to love those folks. Remember, you're supposed to do what's right, and we tell you what's right. No. Are we following Christ, or are we following our politicians? And don't get me wrong, this is not just, oh, he's a liberal. No. I say this about all of our politicians, Democrats and Republicans. I was very angry with Biden. I was very angry with what he did. I was very angry with a lot of how that stuff worked out. Wasn't thrilled with Clinton either. And to be honest with you, Obama also. So it's like our thing isn't to join the party and go like, woohoo, That's why I love people like Cornel West. I mean, I don't always agree with Cornel West, but I agree with him a lot. And what I always like is he's like, nobody gets a pass. No politicians get a pass. if they're screwing around and they're hurting human rights, no matter what the color of the skin person is or anything, if they're hurting poor people or if they're doing this, if anybody's being treated unjust, then we have to speak up on behalf of those people. That is what we are called to do. And this man is a public intellectual, brilliant man, and he knows that no one is above reproach or beyond reproach. I even like this 6. I wasn't even going to read this, but I will just for shits and giggles. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them. You know, sometimes you don't have to, point out. I mean, if I would spent all my time just talking to the people I disagree with and trying to correct them, I would never have a free minute in the day, And there were times where I did that where I was a little OCD about it, but I've really gotten better at it. But I'll save it here for you, and maybe you can share it with them or share it with somebody. So it's not just thou shalt not kill. Jesus takes the thou shalt not kill and levels it up, and yet here we are justifying murdered children. Here we are justifying families being torn apart and children suffering. Here we are justifying why children don't deserve to have free lunch, much less free breakfasts at school. I'm grateful to work with a school that gives kids food when they leave so they can have dinner. Not a Christian school. Just people who care about other human beings. I'd be tempted to be a humanist, but sometimes I find humanism a bit unsufferable. So I'll just stick with the own crowd that I already found insufferable rather than changing for another group I'd have to be mad at all the time. Are you willing to justify ICE because of patriotism? Because you're a law-abiding citizen? Even though those people are more likely your brothers and sisters in Christ? Who do you follow? Do you follow the culture? The patriotism? Because it's not Jesus. It's not this guy. It's not the Apostle Paul when he's not, the pastoral epistles are forgeries, and I have to remind everybody of that because there's some really stuff in there that people try to use to justify this crap. And they're just not Paul. It's someone who's trying to undo all of the Apostle Paul's work. That is the reality in the story we find ourselves in. The best you're able to accept that radically and move on and move with that, the better you'll be. Okay, we're going to jump back further into Matthew 22. Matthew 22:39. Where are you? Okay, yeah. Okay, so let's look at this. This is what boggles my mind. Boggles my mind. Paul reiterates this in Galatians. Just because I know Galatians like the back of my hand at this point. But this is Matthew. Right, maybe got this from the Q, but this is also lines up within the other Gospels. This is the fundamental of Christianity, almost more so than Jesus dying on the cross for your sins. I mean, it's really crazy because I was watching this thing about, I think it's Luke or one of the Gospels completely takes out what is it? Atonement. When I can't remember which one it was. I want to say it's Luke, but my brain, I'm so tired because it's literally midnight right now as I'm talking to you. And I've been at work all day, and then I went and took care of my kids so my ex could go out and hang out with her friends tonight. And I'm flying out in the morning, so I'm exhausted. I can see the bags under my eyes. Well, let's read this, shall we? Matthew 22. Matthew 22, let's just start with 34 because it's just easier place to start. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, They gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. Teacher, which commandment of the law is greatest? Okay, folks, listen to this. This is someone asking Jesus which the commandment is law is greatest. Now, I want you to think about this when you're thinking about justifying ICE, you're justifying our military, when you're justifying bombing of children, when you're justifying war, when you're finding ways to justify these type of things, when you're sexism, heterosexism, racism, any type of these things that get into your life of making others less than, or saying the poor don't deserve this, or the poor, oh man, the poor, they get those food stamps. They shouldn't be able to get cakes for their kids. That's just too far. That kind of stuff. I want you to think about this verse. So the religious teachers asked Jesus, which of these are the greatest commandments in the law? Which is the greatest commandments of the law? He said to him, you shall love the Lord God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment, and second is like it. Do you hear that? Second is like it. Some translations say, and equally as important. So you can say either like it or equally as important is this one. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the laws of the prophets. So that covers old and new. All the laws of the prophets. Love God with all your heart, all your understanding, and equally as important or just as important is loving your neighbor as yourself. So you have to see, when you see these things, are those the things that you'd want to see? Would you want to wake up in the morning and have to search through rubble to find your 8-year-old? Would you want your kids to come home and you're not there? Or even worse, your kids don't come home. I mean, that's Christianity, folks. I mean, I'm sorry if that pisses in your soup, but that's this faith. And most of you don't want it. And it's weird, the things that you do, like complementarianism and treating women like second-class citizens, and you'll justify that kind of shit. But loving children and loving kids and being against war, you can just find ways to justify that. And it is literally like we have figured out a way to turn Christianity, a faith based on love and grace and hope, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. We've taken that and turned it into something cruel and manipulative and unusual, and that justifies every type of horror you can imagine, and then just nitpicks little everyday things in people's lives. It says it's pro-life, yet it believes in capital punishment. Yet it doesn't believe that children should have free meals, or that people should have health care or child care. And you go, well, no, that's politics to make that happen and help that do it. But that's why we speak to those people. If you really care about, you're going to care about the whole life of that person, not just them being born. I mean, it is insane. And it is not just a contradiction, it's hypocrisy. And it's time to wake up to this freaking hypocrisy that so many of us hear and use and practice, and to call it out when we see it and try to do it in the most graceful, loving way, and hopefully get a conversation going. But it's just time to say this is nonsense. This isn't the faith anymore. It's unrecognizable. It's another gospel, like Paul talks about. And that's what I'm doing right now in that position, I guess, is going, why have we fallen away from the good news that we received? It's another gospel. We've forgotten it. We used to see it clearly, and now we don't see it at all. We've forgotten. What magician has cast an evil spell on you? Love, the most important commandment, love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. And the second, as important, love your neighbor as yourself. Those are the two main commandments. Not all the theology, not all the apologetics, not all the bad apologetics or bad biblical history or the bad biblical tradition can do anything to those two things, and yet those are the two that we've probably compromised the most. And the thing is we've used loving God with all our heart, mind, as a reason to compromise the second one. Loving our neighbors as ourselves. Oh, I love God so much, I must not be able to love my neighbor as myself. I could never put my children first because I must love God. And so we've done that. That's what we've done. And the fact that some people will be more upset that I gave the middle finger than the fact that I'm calling out our complete lack of integrity to the very basic foundations of this faith that we have justified away. Oh, he looks different. He's got an anarchy symbol on it. Oh, he's wearing a peace symbol. Oh my gosh, his politics must be the opposite of mine. You know, all these reasons. How can I justify not hearing this? The weird thing is, I often wonder if someone else said this, if one of your favorite people came along, one of your pastors came along and said this, would you go, oh, that makes sense? I mean, are we just all just so focused to go like black and white thinking? Oh, well, that guy's not on my team, so I'm not going to listen to what they have to say. He's not one of us. Matthew 9. Man, I'm jumping back and forth today. Matthew 9:13, I like. My dad, when I was growing up, used to tell me, like, if you ever hear the Old Testament quoted in the New Testament, it's twice as powerful. And it reminds me, years ago when I was sitting in my psychiatrist's office and he diagnosed me with something that I'd never heard before, and I've only heard of one other person having it. And almost everybody I told, especially Pete Rollins, but then another group, I just did a podcast, and another group of people laughed too, as I was given something called, told I suffered from double depression. Double depression. You're so depressed you had it twice, you know, and it's the idea is that I'm melancholy personality, and then I also have the mental chemicals that kind of make me depressed, but that's double depression, you know. And so my dad would be like, it's double important. I don't know if it's double important or not, but I always liked some of that old time religion stuff. It's double important. Really listen if it's you know. I like when the stories change a little bit, when like Jesus kind of cherry picks some of the Old Testament, and then when Paul kind of, you left that part out, you didn't mention that, you know. I always find that's interesting, because then when you get called a cherry picker, you can be like, I'm just like Jesus. Matthew 9, where are we? Matthew 9:13. Jesus goes and calls Matthew at his tax collection booth. That used to be my key sermon, man. I used to love that, Jesus calling Matthew in the midst of tax collecting. Like, who does that? Who's like, hey, there's a guy who's kind of a traitor to our own people and is hurting our people in a bad part of society in the wrong crowd, and I'm probably going to get in trouble just for hanging out with him. I think I'm going to pick that guy to be a disciple. And if you know anything about how disciples followed rabbis, it was the disciple that would go to the rabbi, and the rabbi would deny them usually like 3 times to make sure they were really serious. And here Jesus is going like, no, oh, hey, the guy who seems like the least candidate, and some of the guys in my crew already, you know, are zealots, want to kill one of you. You want to be in my gang? You want to join the crew? You want to hang out? It's a great story. But he ends with this, and I think it's really great. He goes, now, after he says, now, he tells them that healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I've come to call sinners, not those who think they're good enough. But then he goes on and goes, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire mercy, not sacrifice, for I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. So I see so many people who seem to, instead of showing mercy, going, well, I'm just suffering for the gospel. And I'm like, yeah, you're suffering for the gospel. And guess what? We're all suffering because you're suffering. We're all suffering for your gospel. There's no mercy. There's no loving your neighbor as yourself. And if this is how you love yourself, you must hate yourself. I remember one time sitting in my therapist's office, and I was talking about thoughts I had, and he said, would you ever say this? No, she said this. It was my DBT therapist. Would you ever say what you're thinking and how you feel about yourself to anyone in your congregation? I said, no. And she's like, well, why do you say it to yourself? So for me, I was having a little bit harder time with loving the self rather than the neighbor. I'm like, oh, I love the neighbor, and that gives me an excuse to hate myself. but neither are we, because we are accepted as well. This is grace and love and is for us and to share with others, to share within this mercy and this love. But instead, we've turned this into this giant sacrificial system and then act like, oh, well, 100 kids die in war. That's just part of the day. What's for dinner? No mercy for those poor children and those parents. No empathy, no sympathy, and that's why they want to tell you to not be empathetic, because if you start to be empathetic, you're going to be a huge problem. You're going to be a huge pain in the ass because you're going to start speaking out and you're going to start walking the streets and you're going to start wearing a bunch of little badges amongst your punk badges that have little messages about equality, and you're going to start handing out food and you're going to start treating people differently and you're going to start questioning yourself and you're going to have tougher conversations, and people are going to see you as the fly in the ointment of their way of life and their way of Christianity and their way of faith, because you're going like, oh, I got to love myself and I got to love neighbors. So I got to do these things. I got to be merciful. And that's all right. Let's see. First John. I'm going to read First John and then I'll let everybody go. I thought this was going to be like 10 minutes, to be honest with you guys. I was like, oh, I don't have a lot here. It's just this title came to me, and I think there's something here. And these poor children and these poor families who were killed today. Casualties, the civilian casualties. We've really become very numb to civilian casualties. And the amount of how willing we're going to defend a group of people because maybe they're our party or our race or our religion, and to just justify hundreds and thousands of innocent people being killed and maimed and tortured and hunted down and treated horrifically is beyond me. I don't understand this faith anymore. Oh yeah, this is an easy one to remember. It's 1 John 4:20. Sorry, I'm very tired, folks. 1 John 4:20. Hard one to forget, right? Those who say, I love God, and hate their brother and sister are liars. For those who do not love their brothers and sisters whom they have seen cannot love a God whom they have not seen. This is a commandment we have from him, is this: those who love God must love their brothers and sisters also. The first two most important commandments. The rest of 1 John, knowing what Jesus talked about. And you say, well, Jay, I don't see those people. Yes, you do. You see their bloody backpacks. You see their body parts. You see all their things on social media every day. Unless you only have unless your algorithm is really keeping you safe. You see all this stuff. You see the family. We saw Renee Good shot like 120 times. We saw that Charlie Kirk shot 150 times. It's horrific. And are they our neighbors? Who is my neighbor? And these are the questions we have to ask. And it shouldn't be like, well, you didn't. Why weren't you upset about Charlie Kirk, or why weren't you upset about Renee? It should be like, we should really be upset about both of these losses of lives, and the fact that we've allowed politics to take us this far and divide us this much, that we only care about our own dead, as long as they stay in line. As long as they toe the line, we only care about them. Step out of line, got what was coming. And First John would say, well, you're just a liar, because how can you love can't love your neighbor, I mean, you can't really love God. Yeah, it's a lot. You know what I mean? Like, talk about taking up your cross and dying to yourself and all this stuff and not being of this world and all that stuff that you try to use to manipulate into you being more of a horrible, judgmental person. Actually, it's like, no, the really hard work is that you're really called to love everybody. And that's the real pain in the ass. It really sucks to wake up with that every day. It's just not a fun message to give. And it's never really that cool. Like, there's always, communities and a lot of these communities that do great things, they always have an outsider. And then when I'm coming and going like, you gotta love that outsider too, they're like, Jay, get the hell out of here. There will be some people who are mad at me because I said Renee Good and Charlie Kirk and the same thing. And Renee Good people will be mad at me because I said Charlie Kirk, and Charlie Kirk people will just be mad at me. Those folks are usually mad at me, but they might, or, maybe they'll be happy to hear those names in the same. I don't know, but most people don't want, like, oh, hey, you're getting your chocolate and peanut butter mixed together here, sir. We don't do that. Do we really care about human life? Do we really care about our neighbors? Do we really give a damn about this faith at all? you know? Everything I do is to try to figure out a better way to do it. It's why I read philosophy. It's why I read psychology. It's why I read the Bible. It's why I read biographies and autobiographies of people I like. Like, how can I sharpen this tool of being better at this work of showing grace and loving people and forgiveness? How can I sit down with the people who think I'm a freaking naive schmuck? Or that I believe in, oh, you might as well believe in flying unicorns. I mean, it's all there. Oh, you're a heretic, It's just like, it is not the easiest road to choose, and it, doesn't pay the bills. So there you go. But, how we see these children dead and suffering, we see them on social media all day, yet we justify it. And when we justify it, it's, you can't claim to love God, or at least love that God is your ultimate concern. That's what I think, at least. Maybe I'm a judgmental bastard. Even up here in 1 John 4:8 says, whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. I'll tell you what, back in the day, my New York days when the Neo-Calvinism was really popular and I would use this scripture a lot, God is also justice and God is also this. I remember one time a guy got me, guys, where does it say that in the Bible that God is love? And I was talking, and usually Calvinists know their shit, like know their stuff way down to the jot and tittle. So I was like, did I imagine that? I mean, flipping through. I'm like, oh, it is there. First John, blah, 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 I can't believe I was right. I guess I was predestined to be right. But here, it's like, think about that. I mean, 1 John 4:7, beloved, let us love one another because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. I mean, there's a whole thing about the perfection of love and if you live in fear, you haven't been perfected in love, because fear comes from a fear of judgment. I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, all we do is sit around and judge each other. Half the time I give these talks, I have to just be like, all right, I'm just going to, better put this in a talk, because if I tweet it, I'll be dead. If I share it on Instagram, I'll never hear the end of it. So I'll just throw it in a talk and maybe it'll get back. Maybe it won't get back to those folks, But here's the thing is, everyone whose love is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. But here's the thing. People have found a way, again, to add an asterisk to that. Or they will say something like, oh, it's not like that. Like I said, they're like, well, God is also justice, and God is also judgment, and God is also wrath, and they love all that shit. They love it. And so now all of a sudden that love has become something different. And loving your neighbor yourself, it's like, because they just want to dilute it. And it's, you have, so people have justified God's love as weak and powerless. That's how I hear when I'm hearing these arguments. Even cruel, because like, he's going to burn those people for eternity and not even wink an eye. I'm like, oh, no wonder you're a bastard. No wonder you're an angry person. No wonder you don't have any empathy for anyone. All to justify groupthink, or some German theologian who had this weird idea that, well, he was the smartest. Not just like being able to read the scripture himself. They're going, oh, a theologian told me that this is not, God is really a son of a gun. That's what he told me, No thinking for oneself. I mean, I love theology and theologians, but there's not one I go like, oh, that's my dude. I mean, I love Paul Tillich, but there's some Paul Tillich I go, I don't know about that. Or to just stay in good standing with your community or your party political group, whatever, I mean, and at best, when you put the asterisk next to love, is it's that you've just been misinformed, that you've just become a victim of misinformation, and that you've just heard some sort of heresy that's become tradition over time, and you just bought into it completely, and you're misinformed. The problem is really unlocking that, because there'll be so much in people to fight for some reason, to fight that love is not that good because they don't think other people deserve it. And that's why there's an anarchy symbol in the middle of grace, because grace is anarchy, and it doesn't care about what you think. It doesn't care about your theology or your theologians or your walls or your boundaries or anything, because grace is anarchy and moves through all those things. And that's why we say grace is anarchy, is because it moves. There's no order that can keep it out or hold it exclusively. It just doesn't do that. Even though the O around the A originally in anarchy meant order. Do some research, people, before you send me some emails. So yeah, there you go. I wanted to end this, and I'm just going to read 3 quotes from Martin Luther King, because I think here's someone who got it. And then people are like, oh, you mean communist king? Oh, you mean he didn't believe in... So I love, man, we discount people who've done amazing things because they're like, their theology didn't line up with ours. They believed something different. Oh, they didn't believe in literal resurrection. Well, oops, everything they said, null and void. They said don't poison people. Oh, well, then we should probably be poisoning people. They didn't believe in the, literal resurrection, or they didn't believe in speaking in tongues, or or they were a communist. Their politics were bad. Can't. Everything they did was null and void. I mean, seriously, folks. I mean, like, this is mostly Christians, mostly just Christians nitpicking. I'm not even mad at people. Oh, he just was so hurt growing up. This has nothing to do with that. This has to what I'm seeing today. Not only am I having to mourn this, I didn't want to leave today. I didn't want to go to work today. I didn't want to do anything. I thought, how can my boss call me and ask me to come work today when all these children were killed? You know what I mean? Like, that was in my mind. Like, what world do I live in when 100 kids were just bombed? Innocent little children, my kids' age, civilians, not even middle schoolers, elementary school kids, and their teachers all wiped out. How am I supposed to, go move dirt? But that's what society and capitalism continues to move. And crank on. Maybe that's how the Gen Z does. Or is it Gen Z that has the mental health day? One of the younger generations. Maybe they're on to something, right? Here you go. Old man Jay's almost done with you, folks. But I want to talk about a type of love, and I think this is the love that we've been talking about, and it's agape. And I wanted to quote a few of Dr. King's quotes that might be a little bit intertwined, but about agape love. So I got it on my phone here, and I'm going to read it to you. Agape is a disinterested love. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people or any qualities people possess. It begins by loving others for their sake. Therefore, agape makes no distinctions between friend and enemy. It is directed towards both. I love that disinterest love. Agape is a disinterest love. It doesn't care if you're a friend or enemy. It loves both. I mean, this is love God with all your heart, equally neighbor as yourself. Let's see what else Dr. King had to say about that. Agape is something of the understanding, creative, redemptive goodwill for all men. It is a love that seeks nothing in return. It is an overflowing love. It's what theologians would call the love of God working in the lives of men. And when you rise to the love of this level, you begin to love men not because they are likable, but because God loves them. And this is the last one here. There may come a time when it would be possible for you to humiliate your worst enemy or even to defeat them. But in order to love your enemy, you must not do it. Did you hear that? If you love your enemy, you don't defeat him. The Greek language has another word for love. It calls it agape. Agape is more than a romantic love. Agape is more than romantic love. Agape is more than friendship. Agape is an understanding, redemptive goodwill for all. Agape is an overflowing love, a spontaneous love, which seeks nothing in return. And theologians would say it is the love of God operating in the human heart. When you rise to love on this level, you love all people, not because you like them, not because their ways appeal to you, not because they are worthful to you, but you love all people because God loves them, and you rise to the notable heights of loving the person who does the evil deed while hating the deed that the person does, and think this is what Jesus means when he says, love your enemies. I know what some of you are thinking. I'm not even going to go there because I'm too tired. There it is. So I'm going to ask you all, do you believe we're born to kill? Or are we born to love? Or are we just born to consume, eat, and die? Listen, I love doing this work. I love doing this work a lot more than a lot of the other things I do in my life to work. And I love doing Revolution, and I would love to do more with Revolution. And we can definitely use your support and help. So you can go to revolutionchurch.com and make a tax-deductible donation. No thing is too small. As always, we'd much rather have you than your money, but finances help me get paid, help us develop our websites that we're working on, our new website that we're working on right now, the books that I read, the things that we do, and we would love to do more. We do, me and a couple of us go out and do social justice things and things like that, but we'd love to do it in a more of an official way and be able to do more stuff, but we can't do that without your support. And so please consider making a donation. We're in need every month. We're never meeting the bills to where we need to be. We're never making enough money. Right now, we're looking for a new bookkeeper. If anybody's out there who's a bookkeeper who's used to working with paychecks or anything like that, please reach out to us. We could really use that. We'll also be getting an accountant to work with you so they can do all the major stuff. But we really need a new bookkeeper, and we're looking for that. But please consider making a tax-deductible donation to revolutionchurch.com. We have Venmo and we have PayPal, and we're really in need. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. I hate asking for people's support. People always ask me weird stuff when I ask for support or bring up my family, and that's another reason I don't like to ask for finances and donations, but that's just how it works. And we don't have a paywall. We don't have any of that stuff. So please consider making a donation. And that way you can help us is by liking and subscribing to this, so people get to see different types of Christians. So that every time they turn on, they don't just see Mark Driscoll, or they don't see just like all these weird people fighting with each other. They'll find revolution, and maybe something will happen in their life that'll change them, and they'll find acceptance and love and be free from legalism and all that crap. And not have to go through a lot of the pain and crap that a lot of us have gone through. So please like and subscribe and share this with your friends. And, we'll put out the shorts. You can share the shorts, share the stuff on Instagram and on Facebook and do stuff like that. Stop by and say hi, get involved with the online community. We'd love to talk to you and chat with you. That would help also as well. So we'll be doing a lot more with revolutionchurch.com. Hopefully be a little bit more interactive and kind of lead us all into different places and maybe get us doing things together. But we're working on that right now. So thank you all. And we'll get back to Galatians, I promise. Promise. As long as the world the world needs to calm down so we can get through Galatians, right? And so we'll plan on seeing you next Sunday. Thank you, everybody. Lots of love, lots of grace. Bye-bye.